Well, for just about 2 days, he was undeniably the most wanted man in America. The FBI had even offered $100,000 for any information that could lead to his arrest. Well, indeed, the individual suspected of killing the popular conservative influencer Charlie Kirk has been arrested. That's according to the U.S. president himself. In an interview with Fox News, Donald Trump said that he didn't want to get ahead of an official law enforcement announcement that we are expecting momentarily, but he did offer some details. Donald Trump saying that someone close to the suspect turned him in, that potentially involving his father and a minister. He added that he personally hopes that this suspect gets the death penalty. Local media, the New York Post, later reporting that the suspect is reportedly a 22-year-old resident of Utah. That information reportedly coming to a source close to the investigation. For more on this, France 24's international affairs editor, Shirley Sitbon, joins me. But before we speak to Shirley, we're going to cross to our Washington correspondent, Fraser Jackson, who's standing by for us. Fraser, can you tell us more about what Trump said?
Yeah, it's a bit of a rarity, really. We've not heard from the police and from law enforcement yet, but the president himself going on Fox News this morning in an interview and confirming that he believes that with a high degree of certainty we have him. Those were the words of the president. Now, he said that a minister also involved with law enforcement turned on the suspect and turned them in, and then that name was given to the suspect's family, and then somebody close to the suspect ultimately said, yeah, that's him. So he said it was ultimately the suspect's father who ultimately turned him in. So Trump saying someone very close eventually turned on the suspect and gave him into law enforcement. Donald Trump then going further, saying that he hopes this suspect gets the death penalty. He also said he doesn't know whether this suspect is part of a larger network. There had been a lot of talk online on Twitter about various different suspects, a lot of people trying to do their own investigation work, and they had come up with a couple of names who they said were part of a larger kind of network of disgruntled people. But Donald Trump saying that ultimately he doesn't know if that is the case. So we're going to have to wait to hear more from the actual law enforcement press conference itself, which will be going on in Utah at any moment.
Now, Fraser, I mean, it's arguably more of the usual for Donald Trump himself. I mean, the way that he expresses himself. But it is rather atypical to hear a sitting U.S. president weigh in so forcefully on what he hopes to see the conclusion of a case where we still don't know the identity of the suspect or his motive either. I mean, I think that speaks to just how charged this killing is for Republicans and even for the president himself. What are you hearing in Washington about that now that it's been nearly 2 days since that shocking killing occurred?
I think this has been unlike many of these things that we've covered in the past. This was not only a political killing here in the United States, but for the president and for the people in the White House who I see on a daily basis, for the vice president. This was an extremely personal assassination and very close to them, because Charlie Kirk was somebody who had been involved with many people at all levels of government. He had, through his own suggestion, had a lot of people placed at the highest points of government. J.D. Vance himself kind of credits his appointment as the vice president to Charlie Kirk, in part because he was introduced to the president through Donald Trump Jr. Donald Trump himself credits Charlie Kirk with bringing a lot of younger men and the Gen Z vote on board with the MAGA movement through his Turning Point USA political action committee. So this really has been quite a personal thing for the president and for the vice president himself as well. You saw J.D. Vance yesterday fly and forego those 9/11 commemorations to fly to pick up Charlie Kirk's coffin and take it to Arizona. That kind of speaks as to how close this man was with J.D. Vance, with members of the administration. So the way that this has been handled has been very unlike anything else we've seen. We saw a military guard taking Charlie Kirk's coffin onto Air Force Two yesterday. That normally is something that's reserved for people who have been service members or politicians or elected officials or the like. So this has been very atypical, but we've also seen a complete wave of just upset and anger and frustration unleashed from Charlie Kirk's followers. Social media has been awash with it for the last couple of days. So this has been a real inflection point, and now we really will wait to see where we go from here, because a lot of people that you see on Twitter say that this for them was a turning point, using that phrase of Charlie Kirk's organization and saying that this will be a moment where we can't really go back from. But of course, the calls for unity still coming from many on the political spectrum from both sides, but that is falling upon deaf ears at the moment.
Fraser, I mean, I want to focus in on this question of these calls for unity, this idea that it's a turning point. Some people see this as being a turning point in terms of, the U.S. entering a new wave, a new age of political violence. Some even saying the potential for a civil war is on the horizon. Fraser, you've been reporting in Washington over the past couple of years, which has seen, like you mentioned, there are many incidents of political violence. What's your feeling about how the White House and Republicans in particular see this moment in particular? Do you think it's being viewed as something that presents an opportunity for them to tone down the rhetoric, or are emotions still running so high that, vengeance is kind of the name of the game?
I think right now we are only, 48 hours out from this assassination taking place. Things are still very raw at the moment. The emotions are still running very high. If you go on Twitter here, it is a sea of comments from people either saying, I can't believe this has happened. Charlie Kirk was my idol, and people are very, very emotional about it on the right, but also people on the left. There are people on the left-hand side who are saying, well, Charlie Kirk was an awful guy who put forward some terrible ideas, and people who are not being so sympathetic to his death. And then you have people who are kind of trying to be in the middle, to be saying, yeah, maybe I didn't agree with Charlie Kirk's policies, but nobody deserves this to happen to them, and political violence has no place in America. So right now there is still a lot of people shouting into the void. There's a lot of people, actively trying to engage with this content. A lot of these things are getting a lot of likes, a lot of attention, and I think politicians at the moment are trying to basically keep the temperature down, some more successfully than others, it should be said, but this does feel like a different kind of situation. We've seen the Democratic lawmakers that were killed just a few months ago up in the Midwest, and then we have seen political violence over the course of the last couple of years. Of course, Donald Trump himself was nearly assassinated. This feels slightly different in the sense that this Charlie Kirk was not a political figure, in the sense that he wasn't an elected official, but he was a podcast host, an influencer, an activist, and this does feel slightly different to that. And a lot of the people who are doing most well now in this media landscape are podcasters rather than established media figures. A lot of the people who are resonating most with voters are these kind of people, whether that's on the left or the right, but people like Joe Rogan, people like Candace Owens, people like the Pod Save America guys, they are, become the new media class. So the fact that this has happened to one of those kind of people has really felt like a bit of a shift. And when you watch those podcast hosts, they all can kind of feel that themselves as well. So we are in a different time. But, now is the time for politicians to call for that unity, to call for that national rhetoric to be toned down. And I have a friend who was quite high up in the Biden administration who's now elsewhere, and they reached out to me yesterday to ask me as a kind of outside party looking in, how do you feel about this in America? And I was very honest with them, because this person is still in a place of position within the Democratic establishment. And I told them very, very bluntly that this is a moment where, this rhetoric needs to be dialed down, because, if this continues to go down this path, at a certain point, you get to a point where it's the point of no return. This person shared my hopes that we can bring the country together, because, America is a very varied and wonderful country, but to see what is happening in the country at the moment is quite painful on a personal level.
Fraser, as a final question for you, as we await this press conference to get started, I mean, can you just speak to Charlie Kirk specifically? I mean, how did he compare to some of the other figureheads of the conservative movement, people that you mentioned earlier, like Joe Rogan, like Candace Owens? I mean, what is it about him individually that made him so popular and essential to the Trump administration?
I think there's a couple of different sides. If you look at the side of Charlie Kirk that was known to the administration and was a friend to the administration, J.D. Vance effectively eulogized Charlie Kirk just the other day on Twitter, posting a very lengthy post about his relationship with Charlie Kirk. He spoke about how he was an honorable and loyal friend who would always remember everything you said to him, who was always supporting you, even in your darkest moments. Of course, that was the kind of man that J.D. Vance knew. The public persona of Charlie Kirk, he was kind of somebody who could do it all. He was, very, he liked to put himself out into the public discourse. He liked to go into places where people would disagree with him and try to debate people, whether you agree with his politics or not. He was a very talented orator, regardless of the content of things that he was saying. He was somebody who would, was always quick with a comeback. And of course, he was somebody who also got owned in his own way at times. But, he was a very interesting personality.